What I want to know is how does one get involved in doing rock work as a woman? Do you really, really want to know? Or do you just want the rehearsed response that I always give? What would happen if we chose to really tell the truth about ourselves? Like if we really, really just told the real truth of our lives. I'm not saying that it's true. I'm saying that it's my truth.
You're listening to Hammered.
Sexuality. 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 What in the world? How in the world are we supposed to have a healthy view of what sexuality is? I had such a distorted view of sex. As a child, I was 5 years old, and this neighborhood kid, he came out the door one day, and he was an only child. His name was Timmy. And he walks out with 2 Pabst Blue Ribbons and said, "Hey, you want a beer?" And I said, "Yeah." And they had a dune buggy in their carport, and it was purple fiberglass that kind of sparkled. And I loved that thing. It was an old Volkswagen that they turned into this dune buggy with a roll bar. And he and I got in there, and we decided, let's pretend like we're going to Florida. We called it Florida, like with an A. And we sat there and we drank those beers, and his parents, they were always inside, and there was something kind of weird going on in that house. And Timmy had this real far away look in his eye. He was kind of dissociated and just not all there. There was something strange about him, and I felt sorry for him in a way. And sometimes I'd hear the parents yelling in the house. And one time his mother came to the door, and she looked like Cher. And she was real dark. And the neighborhood kids said she was an Indian, but I think she was just tan. But she came to the door, and she had on like a cowgirl outfit, but it was like hot pants, like white shorts, like way short, and pantyhose and white go-go boots and a vest, like a white vest, but nothing under it, and a white cowboy hat. And she had a little holster with 2 fake little silver pistols. And and that was like in the daytime, wearing that outfit. And I remember thinking, like, what is going on in that house? So Timmy and I played like we were going to Florida, and we drank our beers. This might have been one of my first drinks of alcohol. I think I had already snuck some drinks of my dad's beer at the beach. And anytime that I could get a hold of anything, a beer or a cigarette or anything, I would sneak. I think the addiction comes from the sneaking. I think the addiction comes from that adrenaline of getting away with something. So after we played like we were going to Florida, Timmy says, "You want to go down in the woods?" And we went down in the woods and proceeded to take our clothes off. And I think, we attempted to have sex, and it was his idea. And I was just going along with it, and I was real, real scared. I was real nervous about getting caught, about somebody seeing us. But I remember this skin-to-skin contact. I remember he smelled like bread. But it was so intriguing and so intoxicating because there was something about the friction of the skin that really sent me into this other place that I'd never felt. And I went home after that, and I was scared to death. I was so nervous and scared and worried, and I told my brother what had happened, and he said, "You're going to have to run away. You're going to have a baby. You're going to have to run away." And I started crying, and so he took me to a neighbor boy, this teenager, and Tony was his name, and he was shooting baskets out at the basketball goal, and my brother told him what had happened, and he said he stopped in the middle of the free throw, had his wrist cocked back ready to shoot the basketball, and my brother said, "Is she going to have a baby?" And he said, "Nah, I think they have to bleed." And I remember I went down in the woods and I stuck my finger down my throat and I made myself throw up. And I was so scared, and I was so shamed, and I was so worried. And I remember saying, I'm sorry, God, I'm sorry. And this set off an entire life of shame and guilt, vicious cycle, shame and guilt. But for every time that I would feel that, there was this other side of me that wanted to do it again, that wanted to go do something bad, that wanted to go back out there. And it was like I was a target. It was like I was a neighborhood target for sexual fantasy or exploitation. We would play like weird games like kidnapper and robber, and I was the one that was kidnapped. And, these kids attempted to sodomize me with a blue dustpan handle, and I was just mortified. And I remember they were laughing, but then their breathing got kind of heavy, and I got scared, and it was this exhilaration. I had to get out of there, and I was struggling, and I remember my face down in this dirty carpet in this playhouse, in quotations, and going home the next day, and after the spend the night party, and just feeling sick and nervous, and the anxiety of what had happened and blocking it out of my mind. And so by the time I got into high school, I had met a girl, and I was driving my car, and I'd take the basketball girls after practice, and we would make the rounds, and we would go to all these beer stores, and I'd put on sunglasses and walk in and say, "How's it going?" to the clerk, and I'd go back and I'd buy beer. And the drinking age was 18 in Georgia at the time. Well, I was 16, and they never carded me. I was big in stature, so I would and I wouldn't buy like an excessive amount of beer. I would buy like a small Pony 8-pack of Miller Lite. And then I'd come out and put it in the trunk, and me and the girls would go to another store until we'd get enough, and then we'd go out in the woods and drink this beer and get drunk and laugh. And there was this one particular girl that would be in the back seat, and I'd be driving, and I would catch her eyes in the rear view mirror. And I knew there was some kind of connection there, but I would avoid it. And so weeks would go by, and we continued on this drunken escapade. And then this one day, she came by my classroom, and when people, when kids used to make notes and like a football, and she flipped it into the room, and it came in, and I grabbed it. And my teacher, who I had a crush on, of course, Miss Lewis, and she had this cleavage, and she would lean over you when she would help you with your science work. And she wore like really clean, crisp white blouses, and they'd be kind of open. And I remember just thinking, God, there's something wrong with me, because I couldn't wait to ask a question. And she would come over and lean down and help me with my work. And I was always just infatuated with her. But she wrote me this note and said, why don't you and I just go today on the beer run? And she called it SED, S-E-D, which stood for a sedative. We labeled it that so that if anybody ever got the note, they wouldn't know what we were talking about. So let's go get SED today, just you and I. And my heart started racing, and I was like, oh no, I can't. Well, this girl, She was a knockout. She looked like a young Charlize Theron, looking back on it. And how am I going to say no? I didn't have any boundaries. And of course I said yes. And she and I went out and we got beer and we drove around. I remember we were listening to Aerosmith, Draw the Line. Kind of ironic. And we ended up in this cul-de-sac in this like new development. And all the builders had gone home and it was dusk. And I remember this insatiable appetite for lust and skin, and I could not believe what was going to happen, and I was not going to dare ever be a predator or make a move or ever do anything, because I felt like such a sinner. I felt like such a seedy, sick person. And she reached over and she got my hand. And the sensations that went through my body, I can't even describe. And we made out in my car, and I took her home, and it was just, and I drove home and I was in a panic and I was drunk, and I got home and I went in the refrigerator and I got an onion and I took a bite out of the onion because I knew I smelled like alcohol. My sister's like, "What are you doing?" And I went and dribbled my basketball down the street. I was trying to exercise and get this out of my body, like what I had just done. And I kept telling myself, that would have never happened. That would have never happened. If I hadn't been drinking, that wouldn't have happened. I kept telling myself over and over and over. And I got back in the house and she called me. And she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "Yeah." She goes, "Let's do it again tomorrow." So this set off this frenzy of a lifetime. And it continued into my adult life, my early teens, my late teens, my college experience. But I was always waiting. It was like I was always waiting, this perpetual wait for someone to reach out to me and to love me and to care for me. And I think that's the ultimate call. But I had no understanding, because being gay and being a female, you're taught in biology that we're here to create, procreate, you read the Bible, and it's like, well, I ain't having no baby. I don't want to have a fucking baby. I don't want to be with a man. I don't, and I'd go to church on Sunday and I would sit there, and I remember in my Bible I would mark when the preacher would talk about homosexuality and sodomy and Sodom and Gomorrah. I would mark these little upside down, little horseshoe marks beside the Leviticus and Romans and these passages that related to anything to do with homosexuals and man laying with man and all of these things that they would talk about. So I knew I was going to hell. I knew that I was on my way. And so I thought, well, I might as well just go ahead and go. So the night of Jackson Browne, we went to the concert and we got drunker and drunker and drunker. And I remember Dave reaching over and holding my hand. And I remember my hand was bigger than his hand. And it was the most unnatural, weird feeling to me to hold his hand. Because there was something about hand holding that it was lovey-dovey, I guess is how I would put it. It felt like romantic, and I didn't want to be romantic with him. And I sat there and I just remember thinking, I gotta tell him. I have to tell him that those phone calls that I run and catch the phone before he gets to it, it's not my ex-boyfriend. It's Ann, number one, calling me in the middle of the night, most likely for a sexual encounter to meet up at some hotel or in the car or somewhere. And I would lie to him and tell him that it was my old boyfriend, who I actually had a boyfriend with that name, who had been my mother's boss's son when I was 13, and she tried to hook me up with him, and I actually had some feelings toward him. And my grandmother died suddenly at 67, dropped dead of a heart attack, and I thought God killed her because I had had a few sexual encounters with him, not sexual intercourse, but I knew that he wanted to have sex, and I knew that I felt like I probably would have, and I felt like God killed my grandmother because of my actions. Now, this is fucked up. Why did I have to feel that? Why did I have to think that? I'm telling you, religion can work a number on a psyche. Also, a narcissistic set of parents and just bleeding that into your DNA, thinking that everything that happened to me was because of a punishment. So I'm at Jackson Browne, and he's closing the concert, and I'm like, I gotta tell him. So I looked over at him, and I said, hey, you want to go to a bar? And he's like, yeah. So we get in my 75 Celica, which my dad had gotten me after I got a little scholarship to go to college. So we drive over to this women's bar. And I didn't tell Dave. And it was called Tallulah's, and it was on Piedmont. And so we pay the cover and we walk in. Well, he was kind of smiling. I remember his demeanor. I kind of watched him. And right when we walked in, there was a group of gals, and they were like, hey, where have you been? And I recognized a few of them, and these girls, and they grabbed me by the arm, and they drugged me in the bathroom. They go, who's that guy? I said, y'all, that's my roommate, and he doesn't know I'm gay. And they go, and you brought him here? And I said, yeah, I'm trying to tell him. Well, about that time, he comes rushing into the bathroom. He grabs me by the arm, and he pulls me out. He goes, get out. We got to get out of here. And he was a strong guy. He lifted weights. He worked out. And I was strong too, but this, he was pretty fit. So he pulls me out of there by my arm, and we get out in the car, and I said, shut the fuck up. And I start driving, and he starts screaming at me, what are you doing? Why'd you take me there? And I said, let's just wait till we get home and talk about this. We can't talk. I need to drive. I need to focus. So we get home, and we, he's sort of screaming at me, and we sat down for a minute, and it was about 3 a.m., I think, and the phone rang. And we both looked at each other in silence, and he looks at the phone, and I looked at the phone, and I ran to get the phone, and he pulled the phone out of the wall. He pulled the cord out of the wall and threw it against the wall. And he started pacing back and forth and back and forth. Who is that that's calling? Who is that that's calling every night? And he goes in the kitchen, and my bottle of vodka was sitting there, which was just about empty. I'd say there's about an inch left in the bottom. And he goes, you know what? You're not going to hurt me like this. You're not going to hurt me like this, Jill. And he reaches over, and he takes that half gallon of vodka by the handle, and he busted it over his head. He burst it over his head. And when he did, it was like I was watching some kind of slow motion horror film. Blood just shot up out of his head like a fountain. And I stood there, and we were both wearing white. And I grabbed his V-neck white t-shirt, and I ripped it off his chest, and I wrapped it around his head like a turban. And I'm like, oh, shit. Now I have to take you to the hospital. So I gather him. He's stumbling all over the place, and I get him into my car in the passenger side, and we start going on our way to, I'm trying to get him to the hospital. I'm thinking, okay, where am I going to take him? I guess I'll take him to Gwinnett County Hospital. I didn't know where to go. And I get on Jimmy Carter, and I'm flying. And, back then, nobody wore seat belts. We just, you got in the car and you went. And I remember just flying. And all of a sudden, I come upon this, it was like a Ryder truck. It was like a big old U-Haul truck. And it was crossing over these railroad tracks in this industrial kind of area. And it was actually on my ice cream route. And I knew these streets. Well, this particular place was one of those kind of railroad tracks where cargo, I guess, could come in and out. And trains didn't come through it that frequently. Well, this truck was sitting there barely crossing, and it had no back lights. Now, I'd sobered up enough to know that there were no back lights on this truck. And when I saw it, my choices were to slam into it or to avoid it. So when I avoided it, I swirled 360. My tires went into the median, and we flipped upside down. And we're upside down, rocking back and forth. The turban had come off his head, and the blood now is spewing over onto me in my white shirt and my white pants. So I look like I've been maimed. Well, this orange Corvette pulled up behind us, and this couple got out, and they came to my window, and I'm upside down, and they said, "Are you okay?" It was a guy and a girl, and I go, "Yeah," and they go, and they helped me out of the car, and they drugged me out of the car, and they said, "Have you been drinking?" And I go, "No, not really." And they said, "Look," and we went around to the other side, and we pulled Dave out, and we pulled him over to the side and laid him down, and the couple said, "Just lay here." And other cars started stopping, and somewhere in there, there were no cell phones, but somebody called the police. They called the ambulance. They called 911. Here come the ambulance, the police, the fire trucks, etc. And this couple, they told me, "Just lay here. Act like you're passed out. Just don't talk." And so I just laid with Dave beside him on that ground. And my biggest fear wasn't that anybody was hurt. My biggest fear was that we were going to go to jail. And the ambulance came, and they put us in an ambulance together. And he was groaning and being pitiful over there with his head. And I was all consumed about my car and what was going to happen to me. And they take us off to the hospital. They x-ray us. They do all the stuff. They sew him up and, check us all out. And then morning came, and they sent us on our way. And they actually put us in a cab and sent us home with some pain pills. And we got home, and we didn't speak. We didn't speak for a couple of days. And we had to go. We had to go to work. And we had to cover it up. And we went to work and went in. And a couple days later, it was just in this horrible place. And Bill rushes to me, and he goes, "I got to show you something." And we go up, and he points at the list, the ongoing list. And number 1 on the list, Jill Haynie. And I looked at him, and I had done it. And I had gotten the number 1 position, number 1 salesperson in the country of ice cream and novelties. There it was in black and white. And I couldn't really bask in this victory. Well, then they started telling me that when you reach this place at the end of the season, the top 3 sellers would get these bonus checks, and they would be in the thousands. And so that kind of lit me up a little bit. But this desire for sin, that's all I can call it. I can't even call it anything. There were 2 lives going on. There were 3 lives going on. There was my ice cream truck driver by day, where I was like you know, the Pied Piper of the children and the office people. I was a friendly, loving, caring, funny person. And at night, I would go with the guys and we would hang out and we would do our thing and laugh and talk, and they would come over. And this continued. But then this desire, this insatiable thirst for something else would hit me. And I would leave and I would go back to the bars, and I would take my ice cream truck now because I've totaled my car. I sold my car for parts to Atlanta Toyota. I got $400. So I was rich. But I would go down to the bars with my ice cream truck, and I had 2 master locks on the freezer. And I would run an extension cord, and I would sneak in the side door of this women's bar called the Sports Page. And I would take that extension cord and plug it in behind the bar. Nobody ever saw me. And I would plug it in and go back out and then go into the front door and pay my fee to get in. And I remember this Brenda at the door. She was mean as a snake. She had real short black cropped hair and kind of thin, and she was tall, but she always wore black, and she always had a scowl on her face, and she always looked at me like, you're in trouble. Like, I always knew I was going to get in trouble. I always knew something bad was going to happen. And I would go in and I would drink and start some fight at the pool table or something. And there was always just something happening. And, then after that, I would end up, leaving and going to another bar that would stay open until daylight. This one that was called The Saint. And it was mostly men and drag queens. But I would go in there and I would sit at the bar with Lily, the Atlanta drag queen, and I thought I was important because they would talk to me. And then I would come crawling out of there at daylight and have to take that damn ice cream truck and plug it in so that the ice cream, my dry ice had started melting, and I would have to refreeze it and then head on and get more ice cream and go back out. And it began this vicious cycle. And people would ask me where I'd gone the night before. Oh, I just, went and met a friend. But this desire was just part of who I was becoming. I was becoming more and more and more addicted to everything. I had this hole inside of me that could not get enough. It couldn't get enough of anything. Food, drugs, alcohol, sex. I'd started using cocaine. I was making money so I could buy cocaine now. So the cocaine would feed me during the day. I would work faster and work harder and cover more territory. I would cover territory that wasn't mine. And then I would leave the gay bars in the middle of the night if I ran out of money or cash, and I could go over to Juniper Street. And I would ring the bell real quietly, and hookers would come out. And I remember these prostitute women coming out. I remember this one gal, she had on like leopard pants, and this before yoga pants ever came out, and kind of like leotards. And they come out and they go, "What are you doing out here?" And we'd get a good laugh out of it. And I said, "Well, I'm just selling ice cream." And they would buy ice cream. I remember she said, this one girl said she had long fingernails. She said, "Give me a Nestle Crunch bar. Hell, you got a box of them?" And I said, "Yeah." And she bought a whole case, and she tipped me $20. And I would laugh, and I'd go back to the bar because I had a little more cash. So I was living this life that was adrenaline. It was fueled. It was fueled with desire. And I had no idea how this was going to play out. I remember Regina was starting to help out around the shop. and she was living with Don now, which we all thought was kind of gross because he was kind of, the bad boy, seedy kind of, ugh. And she had this care for me, kind of like an older sister. And I remember her kind of looking at me like, "Are you okay?" And so one day I asked Bill, I go, "What's Regina's story?" Because I didn't want to get attracted to Regina. By God, it's like I'm attracted to everybody. What the fuck's wrong with me? And he said, "Oh, she was married." I said, "She was?" "Yeah. She had been married to the sheik from Egypt." I went, "Oh, please. No, for real." He was a jeweler. He owned a jewelry company. They were like billionaires. And she had lived in Egypt with him, and she had to wear that thing on her head, and she couldn't show her body or anything, and they were rich, and that's how she got that car. And you should see her a place. She's got all this artwork, and I go, "Well, what happened?" "Well, he traveled a lot, and so she was drinking and partying one night, and she hooked up with this guy, and he came home with her, and the sheik came home and walked in on them, and he just totally said, 'It's over.' And the man that she was with ran out, and she threw herself off of a balcony and broke both arms and both legs and ended up in the psych ward." And I was like really blown away at this story. And, she wouldn't go out and party with us. And we always ask her, "Hey, Regina, you want to go? Hey, Regina, you want to go?" She wouldn't go. And she says, "No, I'm going home." And she would never go out with us. And I always wondered why. And what was weird, too, was Don, he didn't drink either. But he had something in there. He was kind of wicked. I knew there was a dark side to him. Everybody's got an underbelly. You're not fooling anybody. But after I found this out, I had sort of a connection with her on some unconscious level. And I felt like she was going to help me. And I felt like that she wanted to help me, but she wasn't going to interfere with me. And I think I loved her.
Hammered is recorded and produced in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Asheville, North Carolina. It's narrated by Jill Haynie, produced by Maggie Briggs and Jill Haynie, and with sound design, editing, and music by Alexander Rodriguez. Our beautiful artwork was created by Lauren Caddick, and we'd like to send a special thanks out there to Minnie and Robin. You can check out our website, podcasthammered.com, and follow us on social media for updates.